Welcome to episode 4 of Creatively Speaking with your host, Lawrence Mayfield. Thanks for joining. I have some good news and bad news. The bad news is that my guest, unfortunately, was not able to make it to the episode. But the good news is that in between guests and, getting the show and episodes organized every month, I make notes on my commutes to work, and I think about, creative sort of thoughts and listen to music and find things that are inspiring throughout the month. And I just kind of note down different topics that could be interesting when I arrive at a solo episode eventually, or, in these instances where I have to sort of put together some sort of, it's not like I'm obligated, but I want to be consistent about this. We're going to just kind of go over a few things that have been catching my attention as far as, what's inspiring. Recently, I came across, sometimes I'll just be mindlessly, on, YouTube or, whatever, and I'll be, kind of entertaining my brain in a sort of numb state, as it were. But there is every so often I try to keep the algorithm very exclusively like music and art related on my YouTube channel, and so sometimes I'll end up with something that really intrigues me. And one of the things is there was a snippet from a documentary about, this is kind of a doozy, but a documentary about a director named Werner Herzog, called The Burden of Dreams, I believe. And it is just like a 4-minute snippet of him kind of being interviewed and his thoughts on the current state of things on set with this movie that he was directing. And I think, if my memory serves me right, I think the movie is basically about him getting a boat, 300-ton boat, over to another river across from over a mountain, and having the help of like a local tribe help pull it, and with some machines and stuff like that. And so the movie was in it's 1982. It's called Fitzcarraldo. He's doing this is a documentary where it's interviewing him on the set of this movie he's trying to direct. And not to go into too many details for the sake of brevity and the keeping in the theme of the podcast, but it's that movie is inspired by a real event where there was a guy that named Carlos Fitzcarraldo who disassembled a steamboat for ease of passage for transportation, I guess it was. But anyways, I don't know. The Herzog tried to like get a boat over a mountain, and everybody was just like, all of the investors were like, "What are you talking about? This is crazy." And I guess he was just trying to prove some kind of point, and they're in like the rainforest and the jungle and everything, and I don't know. It's just a really interesting. I don't know. It was a novelty moment, and I was intrigued enough to like go look up, the details surrounding it, and I kind of got like invested a little bit more, with what was going. What is this about? I was kind of curious, but there was one moment in there, and this is more why I brought this up. Is there was a quote that will stick with me for like ever, and it was just so, I don't know, it's just inspiring, the language that he uses. He's a German as his first language, but like, and it's quite obvious, but I mean, he uses English so well. Like, it's like, I couldn't even put together he used such like poetic language to put this statement together. And the quote is that by the end of it, because there's a lot of negativity in the air on the set, and he's like, can he finish this movie or not? And make any real profit from it? Can it be done? Can they get the boat over? They were having a lot of struggles with that. But he said about, in context of the jungle that they were having to, they were fighting nature. He was looking at it like a man versus nature moment. And he was saying, it's not that I hate the jungle. I love it. I love it very much, but I love it against my better judgment, is what he said. And that always kind of that thought, I feel like is translatable to a lot of things in life, just you could replace the jungle with your job or your relationship or your passion for music, in this case, is what I'm more specifically going to explore. But I looked at that, I listened to that quote, and I thought about how sometimes music does frustrate me. And even though I don't really understand why I keep doing it, and I can't always articulate the justifications for continuing the pursuit of it, and so passionately sometimes, and without any real tangible return of any sort of monetary success or social success or whatever it is, I still do it, and there's moments where I do really enjoy music, and I do really have an honest, just not a euphoric feeling, but more of a exhilarating, oh man, that was, and I'm listening back to something and I'm excited. I'm that's exactly what I wanted to hear. But then there's other frustrating moments where I'm just not getting anywhere. There was a stint here recently where I was not getting any real, I don't know, I was fiddling around. I wasn't getting any compositional interesting ideas, and I was just kind of struggling, but I kept going through ideas, and I kept, trying to, figure out what I wanted to do and what I wanted to commit to, what I wanted to take the time to sit down and really go to the next stage with, because sometimes, a song goes through different, I vet songs differently now than I did back when I started writing. Now it's more about a procedural kind of thing where I have to know that, is this composition, is it interesting enough for me to continue with it? It doesn't have to be, I'm not trying to do something avant-garde. I'm just trying to do something that I'm interested in for myself, and I think that if I commit to it time-wise, that I can figure out a melody. And if it's not, depending on, if I'm taking breaks from writing vocal, lyrical aspects, then sometimes I'm just trying to do an instrumental. But I still need to know that going into that, if it's usually going to be the guitar. So the guitar work, if it's intriguing enough for me to pursue it with any accompaniment, then I have to know that it's going to be, I don't know. It just has to speak to me a little bit differently than just anything. I don't know. I'm a little more selective than I have been in the past. I'm way more picky, It's not picky. I don't know. It could be seen as either one, selective, picky. But that is one of those things, I get burned out on the lyrical topics that I'm exploring. And I've talked to this about, with my previous interviews on the subject of writing material and what you're trying to convey is sometimes, even if it, again, my audience isn't, there's nothing big about it, I haven't gotten anywhere with what I'm doing, but I'm still against my better judgment, I'm pursuing this. And now more than ever, it's the weirdest thing to pursue because of different things in development, in the background, or in the forefront, actually. And that I won't necessarily talk about on this solo. That'll be another episode. That's a more in-depth topic, the AI thing. It's not that I'm dancing around that subject. I will legitimately talk about that subject, but I need to that one is more of, I want to organize it so that I know that this is going to be a solo episode where I'm going to specifically talk about this. On the topic of writing and what I'm saying, I'm trying to also become more aware of what is being said, and I'm listening to a lot of music, and I'm trying to also be, you are what you eat kind of thing I've talked about with Josh. And I think I talked about it with Dan, and I wanted to have more people to sample on this thought, but I'm not trying to necessarily put out in the world all these negative emotions that I'm going through. Even if people could relate to that, that's great and all. But, like I save them for the open mic sometimes, and I'll just like, share it and see what people are feeling about it. I think that people feel it, but then I think that, it's so, I don't know, it's like silly to say. Again, I haven't put it out on the internet, so there's no like there's not something you can like refer to like, I'm trying to explore like how to like vocally deliver like an emotional draw for an audience. Like there's a way to say I love you, and there's a way to say I hate you, there's a million different ways to say those things in a song. And they're that's what a lot of music is. It's a lot of love songs, a lot of like strong emotional feelings that are playing into those songs. Like, I mean, metal says it in a very aggressive way, and you could literally look up lyrics for a lot of the songs. I mean, 90%, again, I really am convinced 90% of music is like it's love songs. It's like whatever it is, unrequited, in love, out of love, all those things wrapped up in that major part of art and creativity. Maybe it's just what we're drawn to. I don't know. Maybe that's a projection, subjective thing that I'm doing, but I don't know. It's just like, I'm not even listening to certain songs, and I just end up I look up the lyrics, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is just about that. Okay. So it's not that I even look for the music. It's just what it is. Like, you look up the lyrics for any songs that you're listening to. I bet you 9 out of 10 of those songs are probably going to be that subject matter. No matter how electronic, how produced they are, they're buried in aggressive solos and electronic sounds and everything. It's still the same sentiments. I believe. And I'm just trying to be aware of like what I'm saying. If I'm going to put things out in the world, I want to be like kind of aware of like how it's coming across. And like, if it's too negative, like I'm not trying to censor my emotions or anything. I'm just trying to be a little more aware of like, I guess the topics that I'm exploring. And I'm trying to get, navigate away from that. And I haven't really been able to do that as of late. But an effort of that is for me to go into instrumentals. So I do. It gives me a break, a mental break, and from putting lyrics and writing something that makes sense with the rhythm, and then in the melody. And I just have to focus on the composition. That's it. I just get the guitar, and maybe like if I want to add anything else like piano or something, I can do that. And I can know that it's just the music is for itself. And people don't necessarily like, I feel like they look at instrumentals and they don't really like, not everybody appreciates them because they just see it as background music. It's just like hold music or something. But I don't think that's really necessarily true. I mean, look at a lot of the classical composers. I mean, I think about a big inspiration for me was when I was younger, and I was I was learning guitar for in the earlier days. In one of the books, I think there was like a tab for Eric Satie's Gymnopede #1. And if you look up that song, I looked up a documentary about him, not so long ago, but I've kind of had a little bit of an intrigue into the character, and he was like a French composer, and he wrote a bunch of like piano sheet music, and then he was just living kind of in isolation and solitude, and he just kind of like put together these these songs that were, in my mind, they come across as there's like a longing, and there's like a somber tone to it, And, you'll know what I'm talking about if you listen to Gymnopede #1. And I mean, I guess I shouldn't say what I'm thinking. It's all interpretive, right? And people say that like it's furniture, lounge music, and it's just like, you go to a hotel and then it's just playing in the background or something. And I mean, okay, whatever. That's how we're calling that music. I don't really care for that, throwaway sort of observation. I mean, music was I think the music is very personal to whoever's writing it, right? So I think Eric Satie he was a person and he was like having real emotions, and he channeled that into that music. I'm one of those people that I'm starting to believe that the music, like through my conversations I've had with a couple of the guests, is that, the writing and the music itself is a direct reflection of your state of mind, right? So I don't have any doubts that Erik Satie was, even if he wasn't saying a bunch of things, he was still conveying it in his piano. I don't think I'm being like super, deep or philosophical when I'm saying that. It is what it is, and that's how I'm trying to understand it. And I think it's a synchronizing of the person with their instrument and trying to convey that emotion. And I think Erik Satie did it very well. And when I heard the song the first time, when I was probably like 20, 21, and it was just like, it was like, wow. Like I couldn't even because at the time when I was younger, I was listening to like rock music, and it was always like trying to do so much to say so little at times. I feel like, I think there was there's a lot of like aggression and like just this hyperactivity of production and doing a lot more than necessary to say something simple. With Erik Satie doing that with a minimalistic approach and just saying, all right, here's a piano thing. This is what I'm feeling. Boom. Like that was it. You don't need a whole orchestra to tell you what the emotion is. At the same time, I think that there is times when you can be more grand with things, and I'm always trying to tout that line at the balance, like what is too much and what is enough, and everybody has different, it's a very subjective thing, but I thought it was such a wow moment. I think it was like, it's nothing that impressed me. Again, I'm not trying to be like some snob here. I'm just trying to like understand for myself, like where do I need to find my balance, Do I need to do more or do I need to do less? And that's, everybody will figure out on their own. But like a guy and his guitar in the corner of a bar like Townes Van Zandt doing, songwriter songs is, the Old Quarter album is a great example of that. I mean, you don't need to necessarily have a whole band at all times to showcase the connection that is music, like you don't have to have that to make people, I guess it's, it's more of a spectacle thing, I think, more than anything else. If I had to theorize what it is that people are drawn to like a whole band versus one person type thing. And another thing that's inspired me, I've held on to another creative piece of work that I refer back to occasionally. It's an art piece that was made in 1942 that was like by an artist named Edward Hopper. Edward Hopper was, for those of you who don't know, he was like an artist that kind of explored the themes and the theme and concept of like isolation a lot of times in his work. He was basically Erik Satie, but it's basically like a visual Erik Satie. And the painting that I refer back to a lot is Nighthawks, which is in the evening, like the painting suggests in the title. But paintings that Edward Hopper had done in the past, they're more, there's a person sitting in a room looking out the window, alone, and there's usually like one character. And in this one, there's like multiple characters. It's like there's more going on. It's like a more sophisticated, like sort of representation of how it feels to feel like isolated and like, sort of disconnected from everything. Because if you look in the painting, there's like 4 characters, and there's one at the end of the bar alone, and then there's like a couple that are together, maybe not, but it's quite obvious that that's what's going on. And then there's like the guy that works at the diner behind the bar. And everything outside on the streets of New York is dark and green hues and stuff. And it's like your focus is obviously in the diner where all the characters are at play here. And the couple is the most interesting because Edward Hopper, apparently, if you look into his life, he was not very successful with his art. And a lot of artists struggle, like a lot of musicians. I mean, Erik Satie, like going back to that, not to jump around too much, but Erik Satie never made it. He never ever made it throughout his entire life. His work was found posthumously, as far as I remember from the documentary. I mean, he may have gotten some kind of something going on occasionally when he was, alive, but his work was not really appreciated until after his death. He definitely did not achieve the level of like Mozart and, Beethoven and all them, being that he was in like a different era, I guess, when things were, I guess, changing. Back to Edward Hopper, he was, he wasn't making it. He didn't make it any movement until later in his age, and like I think in his 40s, I believe, where he met this lady, and I guess I don't know if they got married or not, but like she had connections in the scene, I guess, and she like got his work put in the exhibitions and in museums in New York. And in his relationship, apparently he felt very like alone at times. It's possible that it was like a self-exploration in the painting for his own relationship. If you look at the couple, they're not even like really, they're there together, but they're distant. They're not even like engaged with each other, obviously, like they're kind of together but on their own. The guy's looking at the guy behind the bar and he's talking to him or something, and then she's looking at something in her hand. So they're very distracted. And I think that's him conveying what he was going through in his relationship. And again, I think it comes down to like a lot of artists, a lot of creatives, they convey that, that state of mind, again, in their work. And it's not like it's like a new, realization or anything, but with Nighthawks, it's kind of subtle, right? It's not like directly going to convey that. People look at that painting and obviously they can pull different things from it for themselves and their own experience. But I think it's just an interesting painting because it like, when you look into it, it's like that's all in there and it's a little bit more tightly packed than you think. You just got to look in the finer details. That's what's beautiful about that painting. But it's one of those paintings that I go back to, that I like relate to, because I've been on my own for quite some time. And, I've only been able to like really like pour my time when I have the energy into my music and my feelings into that. So like it's not really that surprising that it ends up being about certain topics, and my experiences and whatever relationships I have or have, lost and gained, you know what I'm saying? Like it's all comes back to the sort of feelings that you're going through is expressed in your work. And I can't really do anything else besides that. I mean, even if I do instrumentals and I try to get away from that, I still feel like it bleeds into that a little bit. If it sounds cheery, I'm still kind of knowing in the back of my mind that that's not necessarily like aligned with what I'm really going through. I'm not like, it's not like I'm a negative person inherently, but maybe, I don't know. I'm just, music is just an exploration of your mind. Like if I had to like think about it in those terms. So I'm not really trying to like, rewire my mind to think some kind of way, because I don't think that's how it works. You just have to kind of like go with the flow, as it were. If the goal is to experiment and figure out, your writing process and everything, I think that one of the important things is to not get too hung up on the theory of things. I've learned this through my work and just, playing music for some time now, and not getting too hung up on just the user guide, the instruction manual, because life is, and this is not a life podcast, but it is about, and I'm going to try and make it pertaining to creativity, in my music, but I'm trying to like understand for myself that there is no, for me at least, I think that like if you read, a user guide or instruction manual, it's good to a point, but for some things it doesn't translate into the real world. Sometimes you have to improvise, and you have to know when you have to do that, I think. And I'm trying to learn like recording software and all that specifically is what I'm thinking about in this context, is that I just have to learn as I go. Like there's just too many things. The apprehension I had with recording any of my music was that it would highlight strengths and weaknesses that I had. And, more so the weaknesses. And that would have to force me to acknowledge and to work with or around those things. And, specifically the problems, I knew there were going to be vocal issues. And, timing is also, those things, like, people can tell you that, but it won't become apparent until it's right in your face. Like once you start pushing the record button, your timing is not completely good. People talk about metronomes and things like that. It's however you figure it out. But I know that timing has been one of those things that you have to know, right? And, the same thing with like vocals, like you could be trained in those things. You could read about the theory of it, but until you really just sit down and just do it, that's how I feel like I have learned, and I'm trying to get to the point where I'm just only learning what is relevant in front of me. Like, how do I do that? Okay, let's look that up. But I'm not trying to sit down and read the manual and understand every aspect before I, push the button and say go. There's just too many things. It's flight control. There's knobs there and there. It's very overwhelming. So I think in an effort for my mind to not get overwhelmed, when I started recording, I just wanted to just focus on what is relevant to finish my project, right? And I think it's worked out, for the most part, because there's just so many little things that I've learned through not trial and error even, but trial and error. I think it's, going back and reviewing recordings and things like that I've done, there's, and then talking to people too, they'll tell me well, check your compression. What's that? Okay. And then I look it up and then, check, and then I always want to how do I fade in and out? Okay. It's automation. Okay. There's things like that you just, reading all the other things, it could be helpful, but I think there's just too much. There's too many concepts in the world to know everything. You just got to take what's relevant in front of you, I think. And I know that's how things get missed, but again, my little monkey brain can't handle that much information. There's just too much, I got to isolate it and make it more specifically relevant to what I'm doing. Another thing I wanted to touch on as far as minimalism in music, I guess I'm trying to explore the minimalism argument in music. Less is more. And I've tried to tell people that. It's not that I'm saying to them because I can't do all that technical stuff, that means only minimalism should exist. But I think that there is something to be said for minimalism in music and trying to do too much. Back on that topic, there was a band I listened to recently. I guess I name drop them. They were called Mr. Gnome. And they were playing at a local venue here in Lex. And, but it was interesting because the band was, I don't know, for me, I'm not really necessarily I don't know, I guess I've kind of grown out of rock music a little bit. I'm not as super excited about it. I go to quite a bit of metal shows and stuff like that with friends, and I'm just I don't know, it's just kind of burning me out. It's there's just too much going on, and maybe it's just me becoming an old man or something. I don't know. Maybe just somebody bring me my cane already. But I'm always super impressed and super intrigued when there's a band that comes on stage and then they have a moment where they do something minimalistic, and I'm and it's cleverly done, There was this band called Mr. Gnome, and they were playing, and they had a song, because all their other stuff was kind of punk rock, just more aggressive and riffy, and it was cool. Don't get me wrong, it was very fun, and I was all there for it, but again, it was again, a lot of it's starting to sound. At this age, I'm just I'm looking for the novel moment, I guess. I'm looking for that next high, right? It's not the same return as it had once before. Like metal bands and their like all their plethora of breakdowns. It's like, how many breakdowns can we put and jam into this 2-minute moment? Like, it's cool, man. I get it. You can do breakdowns. That's awesome. But I'm trying to get to this point where it's like, okay, what are you doing here? Like, what are you saying? And what are you able to accomplish here? Like sonically, like it's kind of sounding the samey. And I'm not trying. I don't know. Like that sounds pretentious. I know, but whatever. That's just how it is for me. Like I'm looking for more like, I don't know. I've shifted my attention away from that genre mostly. I think recently I'm finding myself listening to like Justin Bieber and his like new stuff. And it's like, I'm listening to the production of that and it's just like, it's so much, there's like less going on. And it's like, there's just so much more accomplished, I feel like, in that. And I'm just trying to understand that from a practical standpoint, I'm trying to be pragmatic about production, trying to like look at both sides. And I'm like, do I want to sound like I'm busy or do I want to sound like I'm focused? You know what I'm saying? And this is just an effort for me to like look at those two angles. But this band, anyways, back, Mr. Gnome was playing this song. They played all these like rock songs, and then they had this moment where they had this like kind of ballad-esque thing, I guess you can call it, but not a ballad in like a acoustic sense. It was like a little indie kind of vibe or something. But anyways, it had like the two things that struck me were like, it's like 4 instruments, right? There's like the percussion, the keyboard, the bass, and then the vocalist. And that's it. No more tricks. No more flash. It's just, that's it. And and it was so like, I was so drawn. I was like completely mesmerized by the like the intensity that this vocalist was able to achieve. It's just like, and it was like, she would emphasize it's a heartbreak song where it's like she couldn't, I don't know. It sounds like the writer was not able to connect with this person on like an intimate level. And it was like this longing for the relationship to work. And the song is called Be Here Now. I listened to the recorded version versus the live, and the live was like so special. And the production was a little too busy for me. No offense. But I feel like there was a lot of like distortion of the vocals and like the clean raw moment of her, like, being able to like, I don't know, like painfully emphasize like a moment when she's like frustrated, I guess, with this like this emotion that she's trying to like convey. And it fucking, I don't know. It's moments like that, like with Werner Herzog, his quote, and this artist up on stage, and it's hitting so hard. And it's like, there's a sense of desperation and frustration that they're demonstrating in their music. It's just such like these like palpable like emotions that I think people feel to some degree in their life, even if they can't maybe like articulate it always. It was, I don't know. I was all there for it. That's all I'm saying. That's best articulation I can have for it. But it was like, it was very emphasized, very, and I was just very in love with that song. And I listened to it so much, and like the percussion is also like the other element that I thought was really neat and unique. And it kept the driving momentum of the song, obviously, right? That's percussion, but it's just very repetitive. But her weaving the melody, and there's like, I don't know, it feels like there's 3 sort of parts of the song, if you want to call them verses, choruses, and all that, and bridges and whatnot. I don't really like think about it in terms of that. I just think about it like ABC. Like there's 3 parts, and they're sung differently throughout the song, and they're repeated, phrases and stuff. And she's just going, it's like a monologue of a song. Like she's just going over like the thoughts of like ruminating on the feeling. And it's very intense, and like then it boils up to this like real like tension moment and just release. And then it's just like, I don't know, I'm trying to analyze it, and it seems silly, but like that's what I love about certain songs though, is like you can listen to a song and you can just unpack all of like those layers. Like it's like a painting, it's like Edward Hopper's Nighthawks on stage in an auditory setting, or it's like Eric Satie's, piano where you just like, you listen to it, but then you're like knowing that like there's an emotion that's packed into that piano, you know? But yeah, I'm feeling like, for me personally, I'm trying to go with a less is more approach as a producer. It's not because, I mean, I think, you know, you as two different directions that I've always talked about in music with people is that there's like a technicality and emotionality, which is not a word, but I use that for the sake of the discussion, which is that you can go two routes. You know, you can either like try to appeal to people through the flash and technical prowess. How fast can I shred on this guitar? How fast can I play these beats? How loud can I scream? How much can I, how can my vocals, do all these different crescendos and falsettos and whatnot? Or emotionality, where it's like, how can I get somebody to be drawn in with the tools that I have as a writer? What tricks do I have to really like emphasize the emotional draw of a song and not so much the flash? Like, I think that there's different focuses as a writer, and I'm trying to like tell myself that I'm more of an emotional writer because I don't have the technical prowess, you know? Like, I could spend lots of time trying to learn how to noodle really fast, or like, do all that, do all the runs and try to be like, but I know I have vocal limitation too, and I admit that, but it's just, it's so engaging for me to like hear things like that occasionally. Like, I'm also trying to like look at that from the minimalism and the being busy and being focused, like those two directions of music. I don't know if that's the right phrasing of it, but like, I'm trying to, for myself, I'm trying to understand where I stand. I mean, I don't have the capacity to, like, there's certain songs I've written that don't necessarily, they don't have I don't have the know-how to do blast beats and have a whole orchestra of people behind me trying to bring my songs into this grand auditory experience, So I have no real choice but to go with the focused approach and the emotional approach. I think that that's like my only bet, really. Like, I know that there's, people that are in bands and they're able to like figure out how to like make a lot of things go on and get the attention through that. But I think that, like, going back to, like I said earlier, there's a way to say I love you. There's a million ways to say that. And some songs say it better than others, and I'm trying to understand like how to say that. If I'm going to write songs that are like whatever, rooted in whatever emotion they are, if I'm going to do that, how is it going to be done in a way that's going to capture people's attention without asking for it again, Like I said in the first episode, it's not the audience's responsibility to give you their attention. It's your responsibility to figure out how to get that, how to draw people in. So with all that being said, that's pretty much kind of like my thoughts on this solo episode. We'll probably, hopefully, we'll get, I have somebody lined up for next month's episode. We should be returning to the guest format. I was intending this solo episode to be on November's episode, monthly episode, and it just didn't play out that way. So we have these thoughts that have been sort of explored, and now we'll have next month's episode to look forward to exploring, elaborating on their creative direction. As always, thank you for joining on this episode of Creatively Speaking with your host, Lawrence Mayfield. I'll see you next time.